Wednesday, November 20th, I am on the corner with clergy leaders, standing outside the courthouse, the federal courthouse. I'm there with the Reverend Christiana Heidi. Hey there, Reverend, our community minister affiliated. I'm also there with Julie Slayton Frank, who leans in to tell me that she has the impeachment hearings in one ear, justice multitasking, while she's singing and listening to songs of justice in the other ear. I was very impressed, Julie, wherever you are. I'm very impressed. We are there to be at the closing arguments of Dr. Scott Warren. He's a teacher of geography at a local community college and a humanitarian aid worker with No More Deaths, an organization, a Unitarian Universalist organization outside of the UU Church in downtown Tucson, providing food and water and shelter and aid to people crossing the treacherous Sonoran Desert. There's an article that I will certainly post on our Facebook for all of you from The Intercept. It is written by Ryan Devereaux. Much of this sermon is fact-checked from some of his sources. But this is one thing we know. Since 2000, the Pima County Medical Examiner's Office has tallied roughly 3,000 migrant deaths of those who tried to cross and didn't. Those are only the ones that our medical examiner has documented. So No More Deaths has a very simple Unitarian Universalist mission: lessen human death and suffering. Why? Because human beings have worth and dignity, and to assess whether or not you have worth and dignity and are worthy of our care, I don't need to check your papers. So what happened? January 2018, two young men, both under the age of 25, Jose and Christian, migrate from Central America. They make it out of their countries. They make it through Mexico. They make it across our border. And they make it to the No More Deaths shelter in Ajo, Arizona. Scott is there. He offers them food, water, a bed, and a check of their blisters on their feet. While surveying the shelter, Border Patrol observes Scott gesturing towards two mountains and interpret that as a sign that what Scott was doing was helping Jose and Christian evade Border Patrol. So the government would then arrest Scott and the two young men for 2 counts of harboring and 1 count of conspiracy, which means 20 years in a federal prison. So the first attempt to do this ended in a mistrial this year. So the U.S. Attorney's Office of Arizona said, let's try again. And they dropped the tricky conspiracy charge, but left the accounts of harboring. And the difference between illegal harboring and humanitarian aid is all in the intent. Did you provide shelter with the intent to evade your government? Or did you provide shelter with the intent to care for a person who needs it? That's the distinction between what makes it illegal. So as I sat there listening to closing arguments, what I personally observed and interpreted was our government trying to prove that Dr. Scott had illegal intentions, which is their requirement to do. But as part of that effort, I observed them trying to prove that Jose and Christian lacked a need for support. And to do this, the prosecutors relied on phone data experts to pull phone information off the phones that Jose and Christian carried, which amounted to 14,000 pages of data. And what they used in their case in the closing arguments were the selfies these young men took of themselves. So in closing arguments, the prosecutor showed the packed courtroom and jury several selfies. Do we know what a selfie is? I should check. Should I just nail it? I love selfies. But when you look at these selfies, you see the faces of two young men, sometimes standing shirtless in a mirror, handsome. You see them smiling. You see them cooking. The prosecutor describes these behaviors as acting like they're on vacation. It was a painful thing to watch. One of the leading prosecutors for our government describing two 20-something-year-olds who made it through one of the most challenging journeys we know of, having taken their phones to take the photos that these young men sent back to their families to say, "I'm okay," and said, "Look, they're acting like they're on vacation. They don't need humanitarian aid." This is hardness. This is hardness attempting to make more hardness, rigidity making more rigidity. Resilience is resistance and flexibility in the face of one of the most powerful governments in the world, coming down on 3 people in the desert because of food, water, and shelter. But here, at a time of little hope, there is hope. It didn't work. It didn't work. 2 hours later, after the jury was beginning their discussions, it only took 2 hours, and the jurors came out and said, "Not guilty." The jury declared that the government did not successfully prove Scott's illegal intent. This is humanitarian aid, and it is perfectly legal. There is a second win, however. The judge for the case, Judge Collins, then read a second decision. Because 9 other No More Deaths volunteers had received federal misdemeanor charges for leaving food, water, and humanitarian aid supplies on protected public land. This case took place earlier, but the judge refused to give a decision about those misdemeanors until this case was complete. So after the announcement of not guilty, the judge made a second announcement with implications far beyond Scott Warren. Although it is true that they trespassed into protected lands, and although it is true they left humanitarian material, AKA they littered, they did so on the basis of religious belief. Do you hear that? Unitarian Universalist religious belief. In the case of humanitarian aid, their actions would actually be covered under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, this is bigger than big. No More Deaths is understood as a faith-based organization, a Unitarian Universalist faith-based organization, and Scott and others of different faiths were acting under the umbrella of these spiritual beliefs. And it is understood by many who track this that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has primarily been used by our government to protect the religious freedom of conservatives and evangelicals. However, it is understood by those who track these trends, this might be the first case where a judge sided positively with religious freedom claims from a progressive defendant. And it was us. Resilience. We refuse to accept a narrow definition of religion. We refuse to accept a narrow definition of faith. We refuse to hand over religion and faith and spirit and morality to be defined solely by people who would use it to cause harm and exclude the people who are us and who are our people. And we refuse to be hardened by other people's choices of hardiness because it's not our choice. And we will be flexible, and we will be resourceful, and we will be relational, and we will be resilient, and we will be relentless, and we will take selfies. We will honor the dignity of those who cross deserts and who arrive somewhere with enough energy to care for their friend and themselves, and who recognized kindness and safety in another, and who nourished their bodies with food, and who took a damn photo to tell their families they were okay. We do not see that as vacation. We see that as resilience. So we will stay open to relying on each other, and we will stay open to believing we are worthy of asking for support, and we will know that we are worthy of the support each of us gets. May it be so, and may it be so for all of us. Join me in our closing hymn. We'll just sing the first verse.